Hello, and welcome to the Road to Autonomy Podcast. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. The Road to Autonomy Podcast is brought to you in part by Florida Internet and Television. It's time to cut the tax on tech. Hello, and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Jordan Coleman, General Counsel, Kodiak Robotics. Welcome to the podcast, Jordan.
Thanks. Great to be here. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thanks. I'm super happy to do this. I wish that we were doing this in person like we planned, but this works as well.
Well, you'll just have to make it up to me next time.
Oh, you got a deal on that front. From corporate lawyer to startup lawyer, will you please kindly talk about that journey?
Yeah, sure. We're actually coming up on 2 years that I've been at Kodiak now. And, it's been 2 of the most rewarding years in my career. And really how it all started is kind of very classic, big law firm corporate lawyer. I'm in my office and a partner that I work with a lot walks by and says, "Hey, I got a couple of really interesting people that I'd love you to sit down and chat with. I'm going in to sit with them now. Do you want to join me?" I said, "Yeah, of course." So really no background in the company, walk in and meet Don and Paz, who are in the process of getting Kodiak founded. And, I sit down, I kind of hear their spiel really from, with no background and start hearing about autonomous vehicles and more specifically autonomous trucks. There was a very clear vision for what this company could be and should be from day one. And, their passion and energy for the problem they wanted to solve, for the company they wanted to build, and for the way they wanted to do it was so clear from the get-go that I was, my interest was perked from the get-go. And I said, "Hey, this is going to be a really fun, interesting client to work with and grow with, and, just really looking forward to a long-term relationship." Fast forward about 6 months, I had, formed the company, advised them on how to get going and help them with their Series A financing. And just about when their Series A financing closed in the summer of 2018, I was blessed with the birth of my second daughter. So I went to go take a few weeks, take some paternity leave, spend time with the new baby, help my wife, and come back from that and call up Don and Paz and say, "Hey guys, we haven't talked in a few weeks since I've been out on paternity. Would love to get the download. Let's, bring me up to speed on where things are." And about 5 minutes into that conversation, they say, "And that's why we think we need a general counsel, and we think you should be the person." So to say that I was blindsided would be an understatement, but to say that I was honored and excited was also an understatement. I was able to very quickly pivot to the right quick answer, which is, "I'm really honored, but I need to talk to my wife." Both true and a great way to get off that phone quickly so that I could then think about it more. And, having spent some time thinking about it, in the end, when I look back to kind of why I became a lawyer, it's as much about why I became a lawyer in the Bay Area. So, first is I am one of those people who actually loves being a lawyer. I love going to law school, and I've kind of loved every stage of my career to date. Which is, unfortunately not always the case with lawyers, but I truly, as my parents like to say, I was a lawyer when I was 2 years old at the dinner table, well before I ever went to law school. The other piece of that, though, is it's not just being the lawyer that I love, but it was working with high technology companies, developing novel solutions to the world's problems. And it made the work that I was doing that much more interesting. Needless to say, working on transformative technologies and helping companies grow and build and raise money and realize their vision really makes the job that much more exciting. The other big choice, of course, I had as a lawyer was when I came to law school, hey, are you going to go be a litigator or are you going to go be a corporate lawyer? And, of course, every popular culture viewpoint on being a lawyer, it's, be it law and order or, fill in the blank litigation. It's always lawyers in courts making arguments. And, I love to talk, I love to argue, but at the same point, before I went to law school, I had the chance to work at a couple of law firms and work with some partners and had a chance to do some corporate law. And in talking to them, I said, "Well, why did you guys become corporate lawyers?" You always see the pop culture references. And they said, in the end, we wanted to spend our careers helping companies build, helping grow things, as opposed to helping, argue and tear things down. And that was a really powerful statement and something that I really attached to. And so I said, "Hey, I can go help these companies build and grow and become what they're going to become and get to work with the coolest, most high-tech companies out there." And so that's kind of what led me to become a lawyer and to become a corporate lawyer, and very specifically to become a corporate lawyer in Silicon Valley and in the Bay Area. And so with that kind of as background, when the guys asked, I said, I moved out here to work with high-tech companies and help build things from the ground floor. And now I have the opportunity to get in really early and help build not only an amazing technology, but an amazing company and an amazing culture, and something that I think is tackling one of the most critical problems of our time. And so with all of that, despite the fact that I was up for partner at my law firm and had 2 young kids, I took the plunge. And as I like to say, it was the second best decision I ever made other than marrying my wife.
I would say too, Mrs. Coleman should be very proud because you said a lot of wonderful things. So I want to go back to your childhood. You talked about being a lawyer at the dinner table.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I would sit there with a newspaper and research stocks because I like to research things and I like to invest. And so that's how I got into the markets. But being a lawyer at the dinner table as a kid, what was that like? Were you sitting there and having debates with family members and friends over the topics of the day or what we're going to have for dinner and giving an argument of why you wanted that?
Well, I think the way I like to say, I was very blessed to sit down and eat dinner with my family 6 to 7 days a week. And at it, I think there are a lot of families, and I've definitely had some older generational members of my family say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. The things you should never talk about at the dinner table are politics, religion, and controversy. And my family was pretty much the exact opposite. We said, if you're going to talk about anything, let's make sure it's interesting. Let's all have points of view and let's discuss them and argue them in a good-natured but fulsome manner. And, no point of view is off the table. And, as long as you keep your language clean and as long as your points of view are informed, we want to hear them and we want to debate them and we want to go back and forth. And it's one of the things I love most about my parents and my family is that they instilled that intellectual curiosity and good-natured argumentative parts to me at a very, very young age. And so, my dinner table was the debate club. My dinner table was public speaking 101. And my dinner table was definitely, law school 101. And so I feel very blessed to have been raised in that kind of environment that fostered kind of robust conversation and said, it's not a bad thing to disagree. It's just a bad thing to disagree if you can't do so in a respectful manner and you can't have an informed point of view and try to convince somebody of your informed point of view. And so I feel very blessed in that regard.
You could also say that dinner table was your launching pad and it was your first experience of being a lawyer. So amen. And thank you to your family for
definitely
letting you have those debates, because you and I have had some really interesting conversations over there. When you're talking to Paz and Don, what did they say to convince you? Said, well, you're up for partner, and they must have said something pretty magical in your ears that you just went. You and I have talked last year all about the economics of self-driving, and you get that better than anybody. But what was the magic thing that they said to you that you said, okay, by partnership, I'm taking the plunge and I'm going into startup world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, frankly, it was twofold. One was how they envisioned the role. I said to them, hey, if you're looking to hire somebody to manage a legal budget and review some contracts, that is a great job and a job that I'm not interested in. If you are looking to hire somebody to manage the legal budget and negotiate some contracts and also have a say on go-to-market and company culture and how to build a company and strategy and et cetera, and you're looking for somebody to push you, you're looking for somebody to have those good-natured arguments that I just mentioned I had at my dinner table, then that's a job that I'm interested in. And they effectively said, hey, if that was not the role we envisioned, we wouldn't have even asked you. And so I think that from the get-go was that ability to really be hands-on in kind of the evolution and creation of this company. And so something that was extremely exciting and challenging, and one that I was looking forward to. The other piece of it is kind of why Kodiak specifically as well, right? And I think there's a handful of reasons. So one is becoming more educated and really understanding why AVs, but much more specifically why AV trucks. What is it that the problems that we're trying to solve, and how are autonomous trucks going to help solve those? And, be it, there aren't enough drivers. Currently, there's an estimated north of 60,000 shortage in long-haul truck drivers. Two is the understanding of just how much trucks drive the American economy, right? Represents 4% of the US GDP. Everything that's in the room you're sitting in and everything that's in the room I'm sitting in has been on a truck at least once, and most likely many more than one times. And so it's the understanding that the economy cannot function well without a well-functioning logistics system. And then understanding how autonomous trucks can be the future, at least a part of the future of that logistics system. And, we get hey, there might not be enough drivers. And so, autonomous trucks can help backfill that. But what about some of the other things? And I think some of the things that aren't inherently obvious, ideas like fuel emissions and fuel savings, without optimizing for it, we are already seeing 8-10% fuel savings just based on how the robot truck drives as compared to a human driver. And those kind of savings is not the first thing you think of when you think of autonomous vehicles. But needless to say, if we can cut emissions by 10% or more in trucking, it obviously can have a huge impact environmentally and otherwise. Other things such as safety, of course. Safety is fundamental to what this is. And that was one of the best and most important conversations I said first, which is why autonomous trucks? And they said, hey, there's all these great business reasons and technical reasons and otherwise, and let's get into all of that. But in the end, if we can put trucks on the road that make roadways safer for all motorists, it's a moral imperative to do so. And that has been folded into every part of the company's culture. And one thing that I hold nearest and dearest to my heart is that every single person who works at Kodiak, from the most technical person to the least, from the most direct hands-on with the truck to the least, they are all focused on safety. And that was something that really, really resonated with me. And then there's other smaller things that people don't think about, things like road congestion or otherwise. I like to say our trucks don't care if it's 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. They'll drive at the time that makes the most sense. Of course, that fits our customers' needs, our shippers' needs. But at the same point, if we can do so at a time that takes a truck off the roads in the middle of rush hour or otherwise, all the better. And so those were kind of some of the autonomous truck things. And then the other piece was kind of very Kodiak specific. I really loved the vision of saying, we're going to take a narrow piece of this problem that we think is the most technologically feasible and that is the biggest need from a business perspective. From day one, it was a focus on long haul trucking, optimized for highway routes, and looking to service that, what we call that middle mile, right? The on-ramp, highway, off-ramp piece. It is a definable problem from a technological perspective. And it is, and there's a real business need here. And so I liked that it was a narrow focus, that it wasn't, let's go build a general purpose autonomous vehicle driver and then apply it to a series of form factors. It was always focused on trucking and trucking specifically. And, I was a believer in that when I joined 2 years ago. And I've become even more so and more deeply of the belief that it is the right and first commercially viable application for this technology.
That makes a lot of sense because you see the economics now. So you're on the playing field. You're with the Kodiak team. You see the economics. And I want to stay here on the safety thing for a minute because earlier this year in an interview with KPRC2 Houston, you were quoted as saying, autonomous trucks don't text. They don't drive drowsy. They don't drive distracted. They are always focused on the road and they're always prioritizing safety first. They're not trying to get home for a family dinner or a Friday night football game. They're focused on safety, always first and foremost. This is one of the most important things that anybody has said in the autonomous trucking industry. How do we amplify that message that from the early on from the co-founders of Kodiak talked to you about to this public statement that you made on the local TV station in Houston to come together as an industry to amplify this? So when you're driving down the highway with your children in the back and they wave to the truck, or I'm in the car with my family and my daughter waves to the truck, you and I know that truck is focused on safety. It's not going to try and cut us off or block us. How do we amplify this as an industry that the autonomous trucking industry prioritizes safety and autonomous trucks will be safe when we are traveling on the roads with our families?
Yeah, I think it is one of the most fundamental questions for this industry and really important. I think the first answer is that there's no silver bullet. There's no one way that we have to and should do this. We have to do a lot of things. We have to have a lot of conversations. We need to have a lot of touch points. There is education required with the public at large, with policymakers and regulators, with participants in the logistics industry and otherwise to continue to proselytize this message of just how much these trucks can help improve safety and how that is fundamental to their core, to their vision, and most importantly is to making safety table stakes, right? This is not something that companies should be competing on. It shouldn't be, oh, well, we do it a little faster and looser than XYZ. Everyone in this industry. And luckily, I have relationships with a number of people at a number of the companies within this industry. And this is a widely held belief and fundamental tenet, which is that these trucks need to be safe, that it is the moral imperative of if we're going to put these things on the road, that they have to be safer than a human driver. And we need to be able to prove that to people. And we need to be able to make that case publicly as well as, in the halls of power. And so I think that the conversation needs to be as broad and you need to find as many touch points as possible. I think from as big as, going to DC and testifying in front of Congress or talking to the Department of Transportation or otherwise, but also to little things. I remember some of the best questions I've ever got about autonomous trucks was from a Girl Scout troop in San Antonio at the Texas Mobility Summit last year. They got in the truck and they were immediately like, how do you make sure this thing isn't hacked? And I said, I can't believe you're a 9-year-old Girl Scout. The hack question was not the one I was expecting. They really had some brilliant ideas. And I think it shows that you need to find every opportunity to be able to tell the story. And I think that's really critical. The other thing of it is, I think the message has only become more important during COVID. I think now is a time where people, for the first time, potentially for a lot of people in their lives, a lot of Americans in their lives, have started to understand the importance of the supply chain. People took for granted that their paper good, that their shelves are going to be stocked with toilet paper and food, let alone masks and PPE and otherwise. And I think the first time somebody walked into a Costco or the like and didn't see any toilet paper, they said, oh my goodness, what happened? And they came to realize, hey, without these truck drivers being frontline workers, without driving these goods from point A to point B, we can't have them. And so I also think that underscores just how important it is to make sure that this system works and works well and works safely, and that self-driving trucks can help be a part of the solution for the future preparedness of this transportation network. But again, if we don't do it safely, then it's not going to happen. And so I think that fundamental tenet is absolutely critical to making sure that this technology not only is on the roads, but is trusted by those on the roads. Because unlike robo-taxis, where somebody can get in it and ride around Phoenix or San Francisco or Vegas or Miami, you're not going to, the public at large is not going to have a touch point with trucks. They're not going to do ride-alongs in these trucks. And to be honest, trucks for the average driver are somewhat scary. And I speak from personal experience. I didn't have a background in trucking. And I remember as a kid, being in the back, this is showing my age, but being in the back of that station wagon facing backwards and seeing the trucks come up on both sides of me. I called those truck canyons, and they always scared me. I was like, oh my goodness, this truck's going to tip over on me. And of course they didn't, because they were manned by unbelievably talented CDL holding truck drivers. But trucks are big and they're scary and they weigh 80,000 pounds. And so building public trust and showing a consistency of these trucks operating exactly how you expect at all times, I think is critical. The thing we love to say is the best thing possible is for people to drive alongside these trucks and go, wow, that truck could not be driving any more boringly, right? That truck is in the right lane. That truck is going the speed limit or under. That truck is going straight, and it's just trying to get to its destination. It's not swerving in and out of traffic. It certainly is not texting and driving distracted. Goodness knows not drinking and driving, or even doing something as benign as, hey, I'm just trying to rush so I can make it home for my family dinner for that Friday night football game in Texas, or that piano recital for my kids. Like, I want to get home, so I'm going to, drive a little faster. I'm going to drive a little more aggressively. Our trucks don't have those same motivations. And so if we can make them as boring as possible, I think we've done our job.
I agree with that. And I want to pivot back to the station wagons. We had one where you faced backwards. It was a Volvo. And you faced out.
Us as well.
And everybody wanted to play the truck honk game.
I am glad you brought this up.
And you had to play the honk game. And you'd play a game. Okay, can we get this truck to do honk? So for, our children, when they're in the back of our vehicles, and they try and play the honk game, when one of your vehicles going down, how are they going to know the child wants to play the honk game that mom and dad and the friends have talked about?
Super important question. So one of the first things I said when I got to Kodiak is I talked to the engineers and said, hey, one thing we can't lose sight of is there's nothing more mom and apple pie Americana than pulling the old air horn sign and the truck honk of that horn. So I certainly didn't think it was going to be at the top of the list of our perception team's focus, but I did say it has to be somewhere on our product development roadmap to make sure that our perception system can see kids doing that air horn honk sign and making sure that our truck can do that honk. Because if not, we've lost something very important for every road tripping kid in the back of a station wagon, trying to make sure they have a good time while they play I Spy.
I Spy is a great game. I want to go one step further. We got really into the game. My grandfather bought us a CB radio, and we used to listen to the trucking channels. Now, are you going to do another thing for kids, and they'll have like the Kodiak G-rated trucking? Hi, kids! I'm the autonomous truck going down the highway. Just kind of like the train with the big blue face that the kids love.
Thomas the Train. I think the answer is that we've just figured out your first job at Kodiak when you come work with us is you are going to be the head of our G-rated, family-friendly CB radio station to broadcast the important messages of our trucks rolling down the road. So I like it, Grayson. You're hired.
Oh, thanks. I'll be like, hello, kids. Welcome to the Kodiak Robotic Truck. Did you know that we can go on and have a great time? All right, so I'll take you up on that. So your trucks now are going down the roads of Texas for over a year now. They don't have Thomas the Train or the CB radio, or they're not playing the honk game, but you're learning a lot.
Definitely.
And you're running 100% on time delivering the routes. What have you learned over that time in the course of operating in Texas?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, first, before we even get there, I just have to give a shout out to our operations team, our drivers, our right seat operators, our technicians, our engineering team, and otherwise. The fact that to date we have made over 500 commercial deliveries and done so with 100% on-time delivery record is something that we are enormously proud of at Kodiak. It is really an outlier for the industry. Now, granted, it's 500 plus deliveries. We're not at the scale of tens and hundreds of thousands of deliveries yet, but still, that fanatical focus on happy customers, that's critical. We are not just building technology; we are building a logistics business side by side with it. And in the end, building the greatest technology on earth won't win it. You have to also make sure that you are fanatically focused on ensuring customer happiness and making sure that you deliver the goods safely and on time. And so something that I'm really, really proud of the team and just want to give a quick shout out to them. The second thing, though, is the learnings, right? We've now been on Texas roadways since July of last year and making commercial deliveries between our operations hub in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to Houston and running that route every day with commercial loads, both southbound and northbound. And, in doing so, I think there's a couple of critical things. So from a learnings perspective, the learnings, of course, have been myriad. Being able to spend that much time on our roadways, developing our product, delivering goods. We've learned things on the technical side. We've learned things on the business side. But firstly, I think it's learning how to operate in Texas itself. Be that Texas thunderstorms, be that June bugs the size of, your ear, or be that, markings in and around Texas construction zones. There are unique aspects to operating in Texas, much as there are unique aspects to operating in any specific geographic area. And it's not only enough to build this technology, but it's also to then tweak this technology to be able to work within the specific variables that are presented by the road types and the geography, topography, weather patterns, and otherwise in different areas. And so Texas has been an amazing place to operate and one that we've learned a lot in doing it. Secondly, and this is kind of the point that I was alluding to, is like any business, especially the highly competitive logistics industry, it's that we've learned that in the end we're going to be judged by how we serve our customers and how well we serve our customers. And I think being on the road this long, it's not enough to build a technology in a vacuum. It is about building a technology to solve a particular problem. And from day one, we have been laser focused on building a technology specific for long haul trucking, specifically to service the needs of shipping partners. And again, I think, that 500 plus deliveries, that 100% on time delivery rate, that perfect safety record, it's things that we're really proud of. And it's frankly, it would be difficult to if we were just running manual trucks to be able to do that, but be able to do so while also operating complex technology every day and working to make that technology better and better and safer every day makes it even tougher. And it's something that I'm just really, really proud of the company for being able to accomplish.
And as I alluded to, my investment background is that it's really important to point out that Kodiak's not just learning, you're not just testing, you're generating revenue. So I'd like to ask you, how do you balance revenue growth, your investor expectations, with the development of the Level 4 system that you're currently building?
It's a good question, and I think it may become a more complicated question over time. But I think as things sit today, we are very lucky to have the backing of some fantastic investors who really believe in the vision of this company. And so, yes, are we running revenue-generating customer operations? We are. That said, those operations, it's not about the revenue. It's about the learnings. We are not just building a technology, but we are building a logistics business side by side with that technology. And it is fundamentally important for us to work with customers, right? We're not trying to create a technology in a vacuum. We're trying to create a technology that solves specific problems and that most importantly solves the pain points of our customers and of our future customers. And so we are always going to, at least again, for the near term, we are always going to prioritize the solving customer problems and figuring out the engineering and the business model needed to tackle those problems ahead of revenue generation, at least today. We could just say, hey, our customer needs us to pick up a load in Laredo, but we've been running I-45 between Dallas and Houston. Let's just go do that. And instead, we're staying laser focused on the lane that we're in now. We want to nail that lane. We want to work with customers to make it a commercially viable application, right? It's not just about can we drive to and from, but it's can we make sure that we're delivering on time and safely and the like. And so it's really about, I'd call it a combination of focusing purely on the engineering technical challenge. And then the other piece of it is focusing on that business side. We need to build and develop that logistics DNA within the company, because again, it is not about solving just a technical problem. It's about making sure our go-to-market strategy and our product market fit make a lot of sense and solve those customer pain points. And so, really, it's almost like business testing more than it is revenue generating activities, because it's much more about figuring out how to tweak this technology to specifically address the problems that our customers face.
Logistics is clearly in your DNA, as Kodiak's co-founder and CEO, Paz Eshel, has been quoted as saying, "We're actually building a logistics company, which is why it is so important to make deliveries for shippers working with an ecosystem that exists today." What type of logistics company is Kodiak building?
Frankly, we're building a fairly traditional freight carrier, albeit utilizing some extremely highly technology-enabled solutions. Our plan is to operate autonomously on what we define as the middle mile. And that's a phrase that's used a lot by a lot of people. But as we think of that, it is on-ramp, highway, off-ramp. It is about, I like to say, a little flowerier speech, is it's about automating that long, lonely 1,000-mile stretch. And, there's a lot of reasons why. First is the technological reason, right? Why highways? Highways are a more structured and a less variable rich environment. I always think about trying to, and it's one of the reasons why trucks, I think about robotaxi use cases and where those make the most sense. It is in the densest urban environments. It is in San Francisco. It is in New York. It is in other dense urban environments. And when you think about, as somebody who lives in San Francisco, I always take it back to San Francisco. And when you think about, the hardest environments in which to drive, San Francisco is one of them that pops into my mind. It is not only cars and trucks and buses and pedestrians and bicyclists, but it is all of those and people, driving the wrong way on a runway street, rolling stop signs, speeding, acting in sometimes in a logical fashion. And, you contrast that with the structured nature of divided highways where the traffic's going in one direction, the traffic is driving at a consistent speed and driving in a predictable manner. It is much more variable constrained and therefore a much easier environment in which to kind of deploy an autonomous vehicle. Now, my engineers always say, "Jordan, this is really, really hard." And I said, I didn't say it was easy. I just said it was easier. And I think that that's a critical part for kind of what and why we're doing it. But the other point is that logistics company, it's the business need. We talked about the driver shortage. There's not enough drivers. In addition, truck drivers are bound by hours of service, and understandably so, right? Driving a truck 11 hours a day is a very taxing profession and very hard. And, it's hard to maintain peak focus when you've been driving for 11 straight hours. And, one of the exciting things about this technology is that it should be able to operate 23 plus hours a day. And that allows for, one truck doing the work of two. That allows for potentially goods that have spoilation problems, things like fresh produce and otherwise, to be able to get from point A to point B in 1 or 2 days when it would previously have taken 3 to 5 days. And so there's some really exciting things that can be solved there. But in the end, that's what we want to do. We want to be the freight carrier. We want to carry freight from point A to point B on the highway piece of it, and then work with third parties for manual tractors to handle the first mile and the last mile, i.e., in those more variable rich environments, in those depot parking lots, in those urban settings, on those surface streets where, again, you're going to run into additional variables that are difficult for autonomous vehicles to navigate.
You bring up a very valid point around San Francisco is probably one of the hardest cities in the United States to drive around, and a lot of autonomous vehicle companies are testing there because they think that's the hardest place and best to perfect their tech, but the engineers are also there. And while Kodiak is focused on highway driving for 18-wheelers, there's Waymo. And Waymo says, okay, we're going to do the driverless taxi business out in Chandler. And this week they pulled the driver and opened it up to the public. But we're seeing a lot of public statements from Waymo. And in 2019, in a Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration filing, Waymo said the following: "The company has increasingly turned our attention to moving goods. Are we in the midst of the great pivot from self-driving taxis to autonomous trucking?
I think, what you have seen is a number of players in the autonomy space on the whole have shifted their focus, made public statements or otherwise to say trucking is where it's at. I think be it the movement of goods instead of people, which carries with it some added simplicity, i.e. you can always prioritize for safety as opposed to trying to balance safety and comfort, right? In the end, as long as my cargo is properly secured, if I have to stop quickly, you're not going to have the person saying, oh, wow, that was a herky-jerky ride. That's not going to be, we don't need to prioritize for comfort. We can always prioritize for safety, which I think is fundamental. And then I think, again, it is that constrained operating environment that we talked about that allows this to happen sooner. It is also that enormous business need, right? Trucking, as I mentioned, 4% of the US GDP, an $800 billion a year industry. And those are historical numbers, right? Goodness knows what those numbers are going to look like in a post-COVID world. And as e-commerce continues to increase and increase and increase, you're going to see more stuff shipped, not less stuff. And so there's a big and critical need. And so I think be it, Waymo making its public statements around trucking, be it Waymo moving to Texas. I think all of these things have simply validated our approach of being trucking specific from day one, built from the ground up, a trucking specific platform, code base and otherwise. And then also that focus on Texas. We've seen a lot of people come to Texas over the course of the last year. And it's been something we have been focused on since we were founded and something that we've been there for over a year now, but we've been working on it months before we ever got there. And so, I think we've seen a lot of validation for our approach, not only trucks, but also Texas.
And I'm happy you brought up because e-commerce grew 11% in 2019, according to the U.S. Department of Commerce. In a COVID world, in a post-COVID world, we are seeing today an acceleration of e-commerce. And I think coming out of a post-COVID world, people are going to love getting everything delivered, and we're only going to see a larger acceleration towards e-commerce. As a general counsel of a phenomenal autonomous trucking company, how are you preparing your company for that growth when you have to add on that extra capacity for whether it's delivering Thomas the Train toys or you're delivering Clorox or water? How are you preparing your company to take on those extra loads, knowing that this trend is something that we believe that will continue?
I think this is one of the fundamental business reasons why we said from the beginning, my founders said trucking, long haul trucking, movement of goods, that's where this is at, because they saw those trends. They saw the driver shortage. They saw the continued increase in e-commerce and otherwise. And I think, one of the most important points about e-commerce as well is that proliferation of e-commerce has led to increasing and continuing increasing rising expectations regarding delivery times, right? Again, showing my age, I remember when it was, I was at summer camp and my parents would ship a box full of, books and candy and whatever, and they would ship it on book rate and it would take 10 business days to get where it was. And consumers are no longer saying, sure, send it book rate, I'll see it in a couple of weeks. Consumers expect their stuff in 2 days, if not 1 day, if not within hours. And those delivery expectations, along with the driver supply issue that we mentioned, really heighten the need for self-driving trucks. Which are not only going to be fundamentally reliable, but that operating 23 hours a day, that kind of speed and consistency in their being able to move freight is going to be critical for these consumer-facing businesses to be able to deliver on their promises and to make sure that goods are getting there in line with consumer expectations. And to be very frank, I think those things are not going anywhere. Those consumer expectations are not going anywhere. Businesses' desire to solve for those consumer expectations are not going anywhere. And autonomous vehicles, autonomous trucks are going to be a critical piece to solving that puzzle.
It's definitely a crucial piece to solve. And you look at trends, there's the farm-to-table trend that's only accelerating, especially as individuals are cooking in their homes now. And you mentioned produce earlier. My father was a produce broker, and we had to go in a reefer truck. And they were human-driven. How and when are you preparing to get reefer trucks on board to move that produce? So if there's a family that wants to make a fresh meal at home, to ensure that your truck can, say, deliver the produce overnight so they get it tomorrow fresh from the farm and it's not spoiled?
I think reefer is definitely an area that we think is exciting for the future. For now, as this technology continues to be developed, we're going to focus primarily on dry van because, again, we do still have that human driver in the cab, right? We're working with those safety drivers every day. They're the ones sitting behind the wheel. And so, those hours of service limitations still apply to us. That said, reefers are a very exciting growth market, I think, for this industry as a whole. And I think the idea that you can pick a fresh load of fill in the blank produce, tomatoes, strawberries. You're in Florida, we'll say oranges, and it can get from point A to point B very quickly. That is that farm to table. That is that organic and no pesticides and no GMOs. It's going to require a fundamental change in the logistics network to be able to ensure that there's not an enormous amount of spoliation in those goods. And so we really view that as an exciting area. And I think another one is, as we sit here in Texas, there's a ton of produce that comes up from Mexico. And, there are federal regulations that say a tractor that drives that up from Mexico has to switch its trailer to a U.S. tractor within 25 miles of the border. And there's an enormous need, an enormous opportunity. There's so much food that goes to waste at or around the border because there's not enough capacity to be able to pick those goods up and take them where they need to go. And I also think that is, that just underscores the opportunity and the need for this solution.
There's definitely a need for the solution, and I hope that food, does it go bad, or does it at least go to a food bank or to individuals that are less fortunate? Does that food at least get distributed in that local community?
I think it depends on the shipper, and it depends on the capacity and what's going on. I don't think there's a one size fits all, but there is, and you can find these pictures online, just an enormous amount of food and foodstuffs and produce in dumps near the border because they were unable, it's crates of rotting tomatoes as they come across the border that can't continue on. And there's a huge problem there. And, to be able to drive efficiency in that market specifically, it has the potential to be able to mean that somebody's, that a family's gallon of milk is 5 cents cheaper, or, that avocado, there's not a spike in price and they can get their, I'm a good Californian now, so they can get that avocado within, for $1.50 and not kind of rising prices. I think driving efficiency in that really in the end can be an enormous boon to consumers as well as the shippers themselves.
Because imagine that for a family, if you can lower their household goods and their produce or any like their meats or any sort of stuff that you can lower the cost, is going to have a positive impact, not just on that community and not on the family, but it's going to have a positive impact on the economy. And I want to stay on the economic kick here for a minute. In a September 2020 report from Carlisle titled, "When Their Future Arrives Early," the report stated the following: "The most consequential innovation of the past 20 years may not be specific application or device, but the way technology facilitated the emergence of new business models. Taxi companies arose that didn't own cars or employ drivers. Businesses could enter the hospitality space with no physical assets or employee overhead. And media companies no longer required broadcast licenses, network infrastructure, or cable carriage to reach millions of subscribers. As an attorney who's taken companies public and has a clear understanding of markets and trends, what are your thoughts on this statement? Because it seems like this is in and around autonomous trucking."
Yeah. As somebody who's grown up as a professional in Silicon Valley over the last decade, to say that I've seen a lot of letters followed by the letters AAS is an understatement, right? Software as a service, but everything, infrastructure as a service. And I think trucking as a service is a place that you're going to see that. I think that ability to deliver things on demand as opposed to, enormous investments in fixed assets that require rip and replace solutions is fundamental to those changing business models. It's allowed for an enormous amount of innovation, speed to deployment, constant iteration. And one of the biggest touch points and one of the biggest catchphrases in Silicon Valley over the last 5 years has been digital transformation, right? And those digital transformations have gone well beyond just software companies, and really it's hit every company, right? You can't be a modern business without, regardless of your brick and mortar nature, without that ability to be nimble, that ability to deliver on demand and otherwise. And so I think that's fundamentally changed the way that we think about business, and I think that's good. That said, the counterpoint I'd say to that is trucks are still going to have to be physical assets. As we talked about, goods are still going to need to make their way from point A to point B. And it's critical that that's done in a fundamentally safe fashion. And I think this goes to why we're developing a business of actually carrying freight. This technology, autonomous technology is still evolving. And rapidly so, in great ways, in making things safer and making things more efficient and otherwise. But it still has a while to go in its evolution till I'd say it's quote unquote, gotten to a plug and play nature where anybody can grab their autonomous vehicle, their autonomous truck, and go run it. And so we think that it's one of the reasons why we want to carry that freight, because we think it's important to, again, not only just build a technology that works, but build a technology that works to solve customer pain points. And so it has to not only be, you can't develop it in a vacuum. You have to develop it in the arena of the specific deployment that you're looking for. I think that's one. The other piece to it is that it's not necessarily in a place to be handed off to a layperson. We think as this continues to evolve, having it in the hands of experts who fundamentally understand all parts of the technology stack is critical. And so while, asset-light businesses, that's great if you can have it. And everybody loves SaaS margins. At the same point, it doesn't make sense if there's an existential threat hanging over it, i.e., if things aren't done safely, if there's a bunch of wrecks in the autonomous trucking world, that's going to hurt everyone, regardless of if it's my assumption will be it's not going to be a Kodiak truck because of that commitment to safety. But again, nobody's going to care who the company's name is. They're going to care that an autonomous truck got in a wreck. Frankly, they're not even going to care that the autonomous truck was driving as safely as possible and somebody veered into their lane and hit them. And so I think by owning and controlling these assets and running them ourselves, we think we can do it fundamentally safely. And then, there can become a day in the future where we think about it as trucking as a service. And there's the ability to provide it in a service-like fashion. And again, that's what we're doing. We are providing these trucks as a service, which in some ways help make other businesses more efficient and more asset-light because they know that they can lean on us to handle those deliveries and to handle that middle mile that can be so hard to address.
It becomes interesting as autonomous trucking evolves if a JP Morgan or a Bank of America steps up and finances these and they're held not on your balance sheet. It'd be really interesting to see how the market would react to that as the industry matures in, say, 5 or 10 years and there's various publicly traded autonomous trucking companies. It would be really interesting. And as Kodiak matures and grows, what is the company's strategy for your technology hardware? And you mentioned trucking as a service. Is there a Kodiak trucking as a service coming at some point down the line?
Well, without a doubt. We are creating a service that can be used by a number of shippers and a number of use cases across kind of the long haul market. And so we do think that way. That again, though, I think this goes to the comment I just made that, it's still relatively early days in this industry, autonomous vehicles as a whole. And so, a perfect example is, say, the LiDAR market, right? You go back a few years and, the number of LiDARs in the market the number of LiDAR providers on the market was very few, if not only one. And the cost of those sensors was enormously high. And we've seen a ton new players get into that market, a ton of innovation in that market that's been able to not only improve the quality of those sensors enormously, but also bring those price points down. And that is going to allow for the adoption of those technologies and the integration of those technologies into use cases like autonomous trucking. And, I think that's another reason why trucking makes so much sense as opposed to passenger vehicles today, especially a personal, right? I think we all dreamed of a Jetsons-like world where I owned my autonomous car and it would drive me around and then it could go out and, be a robo-taxi when it wasn't driving me and otherwise. But again, I think when you think about if you were to try to add a $2, $3, $4, $10,000 LiDAR sensor to a passenger vehicle, there's not that much price elasticity in passenger vehicles where if I was walking in, they said, you can get this with or without a LiDAR, it would be hard for me to justify as an individual the cost of an additional handful of $1,000. But as a trucking company, these trucks are built to run 1 million miles. And so our ability to amortize the cost of these evolving sensors over the lifetime of the truck allows us to, again, add in a broad suite of redundant technology that inherently makes these things more safe and ensures that that goods are going to get from point A to point B quickly and efficiently. And so, as we look to the future, I think that there's a lot of interesting approaches that a lot of companies are taking in this space, but we're really firm believers in our kind of near medium term approach of building out this carrier business and building out new lanes as we continue to progress and as we continue to grow.
And as you continue to grow, and I'm emphasizing this a lot, your revenue will continue to grow. And I believe that autonomous trucking is the first one to get to profitability. Way before robotaxis, autonomous trucking will have the ability to expand margins. And on the other side, autonomous trucking will lower the cost of goods to individuals. And so it's a win-win business. You're doing good by society and individuals. You're doing good by your shareholders. And it's a win-win business that makes everybody happy.
Definitely. I think that's the promise of this technology, is that it can truly be a great business, but one that also drives societal good, that reduces the cost of a gallon of milk that makes roadways safer, that reduce vehicle emissions, that makes roadways less congested, and that can potentially improve the quality of truck drivers' lives by making truck driving and manual person truck driving much more focused on local and regional routes, which allows people to, what we said earlier, be home at night for dinner, to make it to that Friday football game, to be at church on Sunday, et cetera. And I think it's the promise of that panoply of societal benefits that happens to go along really well with an exciting business and an enormous need for shippers. It's really when you add all those things together, I think the future is really bright for autonomous trucks.
The future is definitely bright, and think about the positive impact that you're going to have on their communities and on the families when that father can go to his son's Little League game or to a daughter's ballet recital because they're not on the road driving cross country. Then, I don't want to get off topic, but let's focus on the positive health implications that we'll have, one on the healthcare markets, but also on these individuals. And so there is a lot of good that autonomous trucking is going to do, and it's really important to emphasize the good that this technology will have on society as a whole. Not just in Silicon Valley, not just in states as Missouri and Texas. It's going to have a positive impact across all of society. And Jordan, as we look to wrap up this wonderful conversation, I'd like to ask you this. What would you like our listeners to take away with them about yourself, Kodiak, and autonomous trucking in general?
Definitely. I think the biggest and most important thing that I'd love, the public at large to know is that self-driving trucks are coming. They're coming sooner than you imagine. And you're going to love them. They're going to be great for all motorists for all the reasons we just said. They are going to be the truck in the right lane, going the speed limit or less, and driving in a super predictable fashion. And, when I've done my job and when we as a company and as an industry have done our jobs, it's when people drive by trucks, look up, see that there's not a driver in the cab and go, phew, I feel really comfortable. And I think that day is coming, and it's coming sooner than everybody thinks. And so I just want to say to the motorists in Texas, keep an eye out for our trucks. I think you're going to love them when you see them. And we're really excited to continue to build a really exciting business and develop a world-changing technology and deploy that on the roads here in the coming years. And, I think, Grayson, to your point, if they know anything about me, it is that I'm a proud Kansan. I'm not, from the Bay Area originally. I didn't grow up in technology. I grew up in kind of, again, mom and apple pie Midwest. And truck driving is fundamental way of life in the Midwest and in large parts of this country. And we really believe that this technology is going to help improve communities throughout the country, make roads safer, make shipping more efficient, make potentially goods cheaper, and really help everybody. And so see you all on the roads, and we're really excited for it.
And you are definitely a very proud individual from Kansas City. And I've got to put you on the spot because anybody knows anything about Kansas City, incredible barbecue. What is your favorite barbecue in Kansas City?
A very important question. I'm glad we got to the most important question. And this, if you're from Kansas City and you don't want to toot the horn of the place you love the most, then you're really missing out. There was a place that was founded in 1996 that I stumbled upon, I want to say in 1998. It went by the name of Oklahoma Joe's. They have changed the name to Joe's of Kansas City because to avoid confusion for those who didn't know it. But I think everybody in Kansas City still refers to it as Oklahoma Joe's. It is in a gas station, and it is just about the most delicious thing you'll ever eat. Heck, even Anthony Bourdain put out a list of 13 places to eat before you die. This was everything from 3 Michelin star places to apparently barbecue places and gas stations. And Oklahoma Joe's very proudly made that list, and I think rightly so. So if you're going through Kansas City, be it in a truck, in a car, otherwise, I can recommend nothing more than stopping by, getting a platter of ribs, getting a big old bowl of burn ends, and getting a Z-Man sandwich and enjoying yourself. That said, as you can tell, probably maybe a good thing for my my heart health that I'm living in California and far away from, I think, the 4,500 calorie meal I just described.
And next time you're in Kansas City, there's a good chance that you'll see an autonomous truck on the road. And the future's bright, the future's autonomous, and the future is autonomous trucking. And Jordan, thank you so much for taking this time to have this wonderful conversation with us.
Definitely. Thank you, Grayson. Always a pleasure talking, and really appreciate you providing a spotlight to, I think, this really exciting industry going forward, and really appreciate your leadership in the space.
You're welcome. We appreciate yours as well. Thanks so much, Jordan.
All right. Talk to you.
Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte and Company. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.